Hello, stress management class. This is chapter 13. It's all about the importance of social support, relationships, and communication and their impact on how we manage stress. And I've long been a very big believer on the power of these concepts. And as we explore this chapter together, I think you will see what I'm talking about. So let's get to it. Couple key questions. I told you guys I like the key questions in this book. Do men and women communicate differently? I'll save commentary. We'll analyze it using specific examples as we go. My boyfriend just doesn't understand me. What can I do to get him to really listen to what I'm saying? When I ask my girlfriend what's wrong and she says nothing, I believe her. Why is it that she means something else, and what can we do to communicate better? So you see, these key questions can have a deep impact on your life, but this is not just the only focus of this chapter. We're going to get into all types of relationships and how social support factors into nearly everything. We'll skip through the objectives and we'll just get right into it. All right, so here we go. Social support, relationships, and communication. Believe it or not, we as human beings are social creatures. Friends are good medicine, especially when it comes to helping us to prevent stress. Here's a little early research highlight that we can talk about. It's called Don't Worry, Be Happy. Diener and Seligman compared very happy, average, and very unhappy people. Some things that they discovered. Very happy people were classified as being highly social, stronger romantic and other social relationships. They were more extroverted, more agreeable, less neurotic than the less happy groups. The most salient characteristic predicting happiness. So the strongest predictor, when they look at that, they say which one has the most strength that seems to predict what's going to happen. What they found was that strong ties to friends and family and commitment to spending time with them. These were the strongest things. So this is one of many examples that exist that seem to indicate that a strong social support system really has a lot to do with how we feel and how much stress we experience. What is social support? An individual's knowledge or belief, right? Because you have to believe it first. An individual's knowledge or belief that he or she is cared for and loved, belongs to a network of communication, and has a mutual obligation with others in the network. Here's another thing. Humans need each other. So this is a little interesting factor. We're going to venture into the animal kingdom to give you this example. We're going to talk about penguins. Penguins are a good analogy here. We need each other, and other living creatures do too. So penguins up in Antarctica, right? They spend their lives living in very, very harsh conditions. And what they do in the midst of some of the harshest weather on the planet, ice, snow, wind, brutal cold, if they were left alone, they would probably not make it so well. But something that they do is they huddle in little groups called scrums. That's a sports term too. That's what there's usually like a huddling or massing of tackling in rugby, if I'm not mistaken. That's called a scrum. But that's one thing that exists there. Sorry, I got distracted. Somebody walked by. They huddle in masses called scrums, so a little batch of penguins. And what they do is they take turns being on the outer edge of the scrum. So penguins will be on the outside and penguins will be on the inside because it's a whole big circle of them, big large group. And what happens is as the penguins on the outside begin to grow tired and weary and they start succumbing to the issues of the exposure of the harsh elements, they gently get folded back into the middle of the scrum where it's warm, where they're more protected, and one of the penguins on the inside will then move their way outside of the scrum, and they'll take their turn. So this little social agreement, obviously unspoken, penguins don't speak, but it is social behavior, and it shows that having that kind of support and that willingness to kind of everybody do their part and build each other up has a powerful impact. And really, in the case of these penguins, it helps to ensure their survival in extremely harsh conditions. We can come up with some analogies of our own in the human world. So let's talk about different types of social support. There have been 4 identified types of social support. J.S. House and some other researchers were the ones that distinguished these. And they are instrumental or tangible support. This is support that consists of things like giving assistance through money, use of a car, or a place to stay, right? So giving you something that you can actually tangibly use, something physical. Emotional support, things like building esteem, emotional comfort, love, trust, concern, and listening. Informational support is consisting of giving advice, suggestions, directives, and other information. And then there's appraisal support, which provides affirmation, so telling you you're doing a good job, giving you feedback, and information for self-evaluation. So giving you insight as to how you're doing and in what ways you can constructively improve yourself. Now, social support does provide a buffer for stress when the support is received at the point of appraisal of a potential threat. When the support serves as a buffer against the potentially unpleasant effects experienced during the coping phase of a stressful situation, that is, when the person is trying to recover from a stressful experience. So as you're going through something, when you realize that you actually do have people that care, that are they were to build you up, it does help to lower stress levels, or at least minimize them so that they don't get out of control. We know that stress has an effect on our health, but what they've seen as well is that their health status, an individual's health status, and risk of dying are strongly associated with the extent and nature of their social network. This holds true in studies after taking unhealthy behaviors into account. So even someone that's making poor lifestyle choices and poor lifestyle habits, if they have a strong support system, they are more likely to be healthier and have less of a risk of dying, even with those unhealthy factors still present. Love these little time tips in here, and this is something that I can absolutely vouch for, is learn to say no. When you learn how to say no to the unimportant things, then you'll have more time and energy to say yes to the important things, like quality time with family and friends. I tell you, this is something that keeps coming up as we go through this, and being a family man myself, and you're all very familiar with how often I work and how much I do. Yeah, I keep reading these things in all of our books, and I keep picking up some of the other books that we have, and they all keep saying the same thing. People on their deathbed never go back and wish that they had spent more time at the office and more time working. What they do often express regret about is they wish that they could go back and spend more time with their families and doing the things that they objectively love doing. We've spent a lot of time recording things this month, right? And not just me recording these lectures, I mean you writing down your thoughts, your feelings, the things that stress you, how you decide to feel about them, what you've done to improve on them. Recording things and creating that awareness is an important first step, but really realizing and seeing what those things are that are important to you and what's actually considered important is probably the most essential thing that you could do to help benefit yourself. Make sure that when there's things that are not important that come up and people ask you to do them, don't feel the obligation to do them. Take an opportunity to say no and instead focus on using your time so that you can actually do those important things, including the social things, which is what we're talking about here in this chapter. Another research highlight: having more types of social relationships, including family, but also neighbors, friends, workmates, and members of religious and social groups, reduces susceptibility to infectious illnesses like the common cold. So not isolating yourself is a good thing. I know, like for me, for example, I'm not someone that's really good about diversifying my social boundaries. I'm pretty limited just to my immediate family, and that can be frustrating sometimes. I create a lot of the constraints myself, but having more people that you can lean on in different types of social relationships, like neighbors or friends or workmates, those are things that really can help to minimize more stress in your life. Because, it's not a matter of being inauthentic or disingenuous. It really comes down to, there's certain things that maybe you can't tell your family. You don't feel comfortable because, again, you project these expectations that they might have about you. And if you don't appear in line with it, well, then you don't want to be viewed upon poorly or negatively or with pity. So you don't feel comfortable or confident in speaking to them about things. So you're not dealing with anything. Whereas a friend or someone on the outside, that might be a good person to vent to and someone to kind of spend time with otherwise that can help take your mind off it or give you some relief in ways you might not get it. And the same can be true of any of those other relationship groups. So having more varied social opportunities with different types of people definitely is something that can be beneficial as well. Roseto, Pennsylvania. A culture connection here. Community of religious immigrants from southern Italy. They settled in a little town called Roseto, Pennsylvania. They have what appears to be on the surface average incidences of exercise, smoking, obesity, high blood pressure, and stress. So all of those things appear to be within the normal ranges as compared with the rest of the U.S. population. Their diets are higher than the average American in fat and cholesterol. That might have something to do with Italy and being close to the Mediterranean, that Mediterranean diet, but okay, let's continue going where they want us to go. What they found, though, is that with these people, there are lower incidences of heart disease and even mortality, so death rates from heart disease, than in the rest of the United States. What they have found is they believe that the protective factor seems to be the strong sense of community and strong social ties. I'm sure you could look at other things. Now that I'm looking at this diet, from what we've learned through some of our studies in nutrition, there might be a little more to that story, but the point here is to really emphasize the impact and the effects of that social atmosphere. Family rituals may be one of the most powerful protective measures that parents can bring to bear when there are significant stressors. So here's a little blurb from your text about it. David Palmiter, a clinical psychologist who's an expert in counseling children and families, thinks that family rituals are one of the most powerful measures, like we said, because what it does, it says to a kid, planes might be crashing into buildings, kids may be shooting kids in school, everyone is worrying about their finances, but we still have pizza night, or we still go to the synagogue. It doesn't matter what you fill in the blank with as long as it involves a consistent ritual, including family time together. So emphasizing those things that you do with your family. So for those of you with family and kids, I'm sure you have your own rituals. Or those of you that don't have families and maybe aren't in that spot. Maybe you remember some of the rituals that you and your family did, the things that jump out at you that were regular and routine. Or maybe some of you, have regret for the fact that maybe your parents didn't do that and give you that, and that in turn maybe has caused you a little more stress as an adult. Either way, I think it illustrates the point that we're trying to make here and the importance of family and those rituals that they engage in together. So these social support systems we're talking about, they are composed of a lot of different kinds of relationships, all interconnected and interwoven with one another. The way we interact with those around us can have a significant effect on the stress that we feel. Most people find happiness in family connections and friendships. Some one more than the other, but that's safe to say. Another thing, and again, this is not something that I personally experience as much as I like to labor against it. The research goes against my personal feelings about it, and that's playing with pets ranks higher than exercising, eating, or having sex as a way to improve mood. So there you go, folks. That's as interesting a statistic as I think you will have coming out of this entire course. But there it is written in plain black and white. That's not true for me, but I'm one guy. A lot of people, and there's other research highlights in this very chapter that really indicate the positive nature of having a pet in your life. Here's a couple of things from a study that was done where they collected some statistics on happiness. This is from an article in Time magazine from 2005 called The New Science of Happiness. So they surveyed a bunch of folks, and here is what they found when it comes to what makes people happy. Major source of happiness. Number 1, relationship with children. Number 2, friends and friendships. Number 3, contributing to the lives of others, your relationship with your spouse or partner or your love life, your degree of control over your life and destiny, things you do in your leisure time, relationship with your parents, your religious or spiritual life and worship, and holiday periods. These are all different things that are major sources of happiness. As a parent, I completely can understand the relationship with their children as being a tremendous source of happiness. And I also happen to know that when you don't have a good relationship with your child, or if the relationship that you want to have with your child is stifled, it causes very significant distress and can really affect you in a lot of profound different ways. So I'm really not surprised at all to see that that is the number 1 factor according to that Time magazine poll. I would venture to guess that today, even though it's 13 years later, we would probably see something very similar. I think especially the children one would be ranked very, very highly. Here's another thing from that particular study. Do you often do any of the following to improve your mood? One of the reasons I gave you that musical assignment that we did was because it is something that appears right here as a mood improvement device, something to help manage your stress. I'm a big time believer in the power of music and what kind of music you listen to having a really significant impact of connecting with you emotionally, and it can manipulate your mood depending on what it is you got going on. Talking to friends and family, that's bigger for women than men. Listening to music, pretty close there. They're within 3% of one another, but women a little bit higher than men. Praying, meditating, again, women higher. Helping others in need, that's a very selfless act, higher in women than men. A bath or a shower, again, women than men. It seems to be the case in almost everything here. Playing with a pet, that's another one that's a pretty major one. Exercise and working out, check this out. This is where the males take over. This is a little bit higher here. So men will typically exercise as a way of venting their stress and making themselves happier. Going out with friends, those are pretty neck and neck. Eating, guys like to eat a little more than women. Take a drive in the car, that's a guy thing, and have sex. Look at that, a pretty profound difference with men saying that's something that makes them happy as compared with women. I think that explains a lot. We'll leave that statistic right there where it is. How about that? Here we go. I mentioned it before, and here it is. What we see here, there's a little research highlight in the book. This is a study called, this is from WebMD Health News, December 26, 2008. The Pets Comfort college students. Again, remember, this book is really heavily aimed at the college student population. Actually, but also this was adapted for an article called Cardiovascular Reactivity and the Presence of Pets, Friends, and Spouses, The Truth About Cats and Dogs. So an interesting scientific study done in the Psychosomatic Medicine Journal, published in 2002. So that's when this actually was conducted. What they found was that college students are more likely than older people to say that their pets help them to get through hard times. And another thing that they found, they ran this test, they put people through a series of stressful events. Nothing really profound, but they gave them a math test. And another thing was they make them sit there with their hand in a bucket of cold water for a couple of minutes. And they had multiple experimental conditions. One of them was they had their pet in the room with them while they were doing it. Another one was they had no one. Another one was they had friends, or they could have had their spouse sitting there. And even in the case of friends and spouses, they had those people actually providing encouraging words through the experience. And despite that, even with having that kind of social support from other human beings, what they found was that pets are seen to be better than people at calming their stressed owners. And one of the reasons that they believe that this might be is because they are non-judgmental. So even though we have people sitting next to you that might be encouraging you and might be building you up, the fact of the matter is that our impression of other people is that they are evaluating us, they're judging us, and that in turn keeps our stress levels a little bit higher. When your pet was in the room, for the people that saw that were in that particular condition, they didn't feel judged and they felt a sense of comfort that was greater. And they even used objective measures like heart rates, and blood pressure readings. And they saw people who had pets nearby before and during the test had lower heart rates and lower blood pressure. They completed the arithmetic tests with fewer errors, and their heart rate, blood pressure returned to normal faster after the ice water test. So there you go. It seems that pets seem to have a very significant calming effect on their owners. I think for me, I probably wouldn't see that because having an animal there wouldn't do it. You know, again, this is all about someone's personal association with what it is that brings them stress or brings them relief. Remember, it's always up to the person. Not every method of stress management is going to work the same for every person, but what they see, cats and dogs, they can be pretty good in this area. Here's a big one, especially those of you in the class that are married. Relationships in marriage. Though disagreements aren't pleasant at all, they might be necessary to some extent in all good marriages. But more than 2/3 of conflicts do not get resolved. So that is a problem. I want you to think about something. Do you really, in your mind, especially for those of you that are single, or heck, even for those of you that are married, do you really want someone that just blindly and obediently agrees with each and every word that you have to say so that there was never any disagreement? Do you really believe that that would actually provide you comfort and not challenge you at all? Remember what we've been saying about stress this entire month. There is a certain amount that does stimulate you to be better and to provide some urgency and to motivate you into a better place. If you were never challenged, if you were never opposed in any way, shape, or form, you would grow bored, and that would cause you stress. And so you'd be right back at square one, and you would do nothing to build or better that relationship. So actually having some disagreements, that can be a positive factor. However, leaving everything unresolved, well, that could be problematic. So it's important to try and get to some solutions if and whenever possible. And sometimes that really just comes down to something we've talked a lot about this month, and that is reframing your thinking. Remember that not everyone thinks as you do. You should strive first to understand and then to communicate afterwards. If you can understand the other person's perspective, if you can understand their vantage point, then you are more likely to be able to talk with them and work with them because you understand the point that they do come from. A 5-to-1 ratio, that is something that they've looked at as well. Stable relationships seem to have 5 times as many positive factors like love, affection, interest in one another, humor, support, as negative factors. When that 5-to-1 ratio is violated, when it is not as high, or if the negatives outweigh the positives, that's where we start to see this very important relationship start to break down. And here's something that is kind of funny, written just the way that it is. Research suggests that people should first select a mate with whom inevitable annoyances can be managed. Now, things that might seem cute and funny at the beginning stage of a marriage, they can later become the very same things that annoy you to no end. But I think what it really comes down to is you've got to assess and evaluate the partner that you're with. Really know them and know yourself so that you know what it is that you can actually deal with and put up with. Love and marriage, in my experience, are not things that come easily. And I don't think that they should. I think a lot of the reason that we see so many relationships break down is that we are conditioned in society to believe that things are easy and they should be easy. And if you don't like something, screw it, throw it away and get a new one. This very Walmart mentality of don't fix it, just replace it, and then we're good to go. The problem with that is that you never gave a full chance to have whatever you had in the first place working well for you. And I think that there is a lot of opportunity for that, but it takes both people to want to do it. Knowing what you're getting into on the front end and really honestly assessing that is your biggest key. And then as life goes on and as things get hard and all that, you need to understand that it's worth putting in the time and the effort and the work and learning how to manage conflicts, because they are inevitable. You're two different people. I don't care who it is, whether it's your wife, your husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, roommate, brother, sister, whatever the case may be. Living with other people is hard. Dealing with other people is hard. Even if you're eye to eye on some things, you will not be eye to eye on everything. And being in each other's faces every day, there is wear and tear that goes with that, and that becomes challenging. Knowing what you can deal with, really, especially in high risk situations, and also knowing how to be able to work together to work things out. Those are really the keys to having very successful relationships in marriage and I think also in other relationships as well, especially if you're tethered together. You hear about bands breaking up and all that. Those sound like marriages. So maybe that's another example we could look at. Since we are in this vein of things, let's talk love and relationships. And this is a little section that is derived from a different self-help book. And there's a lot of these books that this chapter, well, not just this chapter, this entire textbook relies on. I've read a few of them myself, actually, just even through our conversations this month here in the 2018 version of this class that I'm teaching. I've gone and picked up some of the books that they're talking about, and I'm reading them now actively as we're going through it because I want to see more of it. And there really is good advice. This one here on love and relationships, there's a great book called The 5 Love Languages, and that's where this comes from. Chapman is his name, Gary Chapman. It's a bestseller, and it's written at a number of different audiences, but just the regular book. I had it on my Amazon Kindle. I read it a year or two ago, and I think that there's a lot to it. But what Chapman says. People have a need to feel loved. Okay, we've established that. But relationships are nurtured when we understand how to give and receive love. If you've ever been in any kind of relationship, a loving relationship with a significant other, you know that inevitably there sometimes becomes a breakdown in communication. It really comes down to how we understand how to give and how to receive love. And like with anything, perception matters, and the way that people prefer to receive love or give love might not line up with the other person's expectation of how to give and receive love. A lot of that is dependent on how we were raised, what examples we were subjected to. But what Chapman essentially comes to break things down is that there are 5 different love languages that people typically fall in line with that makes sense to them. So Chapman discusses this concept called a love tank and how to keep it full to nurture a healthy and successful relationship. The key to flourishing relationship is to figure out what your partner needs to feel most loved and then do those things. Again, they don't necessarily have to be what you think of as love. It doesn't matter what your perspective is. If you're not satisfying their love needs, it's because you're not giving them what they prefer to receive. You might think you're doing the right thing, but there is no right thing. There's just what you believe should be what you give, and that might not line up with what they want to have received. So doing the things that helps those people feel loved. Chapman suggests that people express love and receive love in different ways, which he calls those 5 love languages. So here are the 5 love languages. The first of them is words of affirmation. People like to be complimented. Compliments boost our confidence and self-esteem. Words of affirmation can be offered through verbal compliments such as "you look great today" or "thank you for taking out the garbage." That might not seem like much, but to someone that really might make their day. Verbal compliments that communicate love and appreciation are important. Another form of words of affirmation is to encourage partners to pursue their dreams even though they may feel insecure about the journey. So for people that line themselves with the words of affirmation love language, they're really looking for people to build them up, compliment them, pat them on the back. I think for me, in going through all of this, looking at my love languages, if I'm going to share anything on the personal end, this is the one that I believe is mine. I like to feel complimented. I want people to tell me I'm doing a good job. I want affirmation. Um, I don't know why that is. I don't know why I have this need to have other people tell me what I'm doing or that I'm doing well, but it's just the thing that makes me feel good. Because the reason I even identified it, and his book explains this, is you need to kind of analyze each of these love languages, see what stands out to you, and then ask yourself, if these things don't happen for you, how do you feel? And for me, this is a big one. So I think for me, it's words of affirmation. I think for my wife, it's totally different. She hasn't read the book, so I don't know that we've honestly assessed it, but for her, I know that it's not words of affirmation. Those are things that really don't seem to mean as much to her. So you could see why communication for two people that speak and understand two different love languages becomes difficult. I think reading this book and helping to kind of assess where your partner is can actually help you. So if that's something that you're interested in, this is a book you can pick up pretty cheaply on Amazon. Definitely a good read, worth having in your lexicon of knowledge. Love language number 2, quality time. It means giving somebody your undivided attention. That's probably more fleeting than ever in today's society with all the time zappers. Remember that from the time management chapter. Time zappers and things that drive our attention away from undivided attention. It means not having a discussion while you watch TV or merely being in the same house with your mate at the same time. It means taking a walk together or having a talk without interruption. Quality time means doing something wholeheartedly with your partner that he or she wants to do, but you are less enthusiastic about, such as going to the symphony or the ballet or going on a picnic. Chapman states, a central aspect of quality time is togetherness, and I don't mean proximity. Togetherness has to do with focused attention. You can spend quality time with a partner by simply being alone together without outside distractions, engaging in quality conversation with a balance of talking and listening, and finding activities that both of you thoroughly enjoy. That is quality time. And for some people, that's what they want. I think guys sometimes are guilty of not giving their spouses or their girlfriends enough quality time. I think that's where a lot of men typically lack, at least the way it's portrayed on television, where a man's just watching TV and nodding and smiling appropriately, saying, "What do you mean? I'm here. Like, that's fine." You got to give that undivided attention. That's the thing that matters. I guess they're not going to give the other 5 love languages, so I will give them to you anyway, and I'll write them in if I can. Can we do this? Nope. They just let me highlight stuff. Can I draw it? Number 3 is receiving gifts. No? All right, well, it's not letting me draw stuff. All right, anyway. Receiving gifts. The gifts are visual symbols of love. Gift giving is less about the cost of the gift and more about the intention of giving out of love. Whether gifts are made or purchased, they are visible signs of love that will have an impact on those who receive them. This isn't to call somebody a gold digger and say all they want is like presents or gifts or money from you, but it's more of the representation of love with something tangible. That's the idea on this love language. That might be someone's preference. Acts of service is another one. Acts of service are those things you do for your partner that you know they would like you to do. Acts of service require thought, planning, time, effort, and energy. If they are done with a positive attitude, they are expressions of love. Acts of service may involve departing from the typical husband and wife stereotypes that many people have grown up with. An individual whose love language consists of acts of service will feel loved if the partner helps with things such as cooking, cleaning, yard work, or house maintenance, no matter what role the partner believes he or she should play in the relationship. So that's acts of service. And the final one is physical touch. That is a common expression of love. Hugging, kissing, and holding hands are familiar ways to express emotion. Some may consider physical touch as their love language because sex is such an important part of their relationship. But sex is only a small part of physical touch and is not necessarily a love language in and of itself. Physical touch can be used to express many forms of emotion. So having that actual physical contact, that's the other one. For couples, major stressors, and you can think to your own experience in relationships throughout your life. power and control issues, children, money, division of responsibilities, and sex, speaking of. So those are the big 5 relationship stressors that they have identified. And of course, had I had a copy of this thing sitting in front of me, these are the other 3 love languages. So there you go. I didn't want to get off the beaten path. Speaking of hugging, kissing, physical touch, check this out. Hugging, kissing, lower stress hormones. Couples who reported more physical contact from holding hands all the way up through the other end of the spectrum of sexual intercourse, they found they had lower levels of the stress hormone cortisol in their saliva. Couples who reported more problems at work had the biggest drops in levels of cortisol through intimacy. So when people sometimes will say that sex is a stress relieving technique that has an effect on them, science does seem to indicate that that is the case. So how do you determine these love languages? Again, the questions you need to ask yourself is, what does your partner do or fail to do that hurts you the most? The opposite of what hurts you the most is probably your love language. You fill in the blanks for yourself. I told you how I got to mine. If someone insults me or tells me I'm doing a poor job on something, that is as big an offense as I could experience. I hate that. It makes me feel so bad and threatened and attacked. Not a fan. So therefore, I believe that mine is words of affirmation. And then on the other side, what have you most often requested of your partner? The thing that you've requested most often is likely the thing that would make you feel the most love. So you've got to ask those questions. Now, this seems a very brief, abridged version of what we're talking about here, but it's a great book. It's not that long of a read. If you are interested in learning more about you and your success or having continued success in relationships, I would very highly recommend this book from Gary Chapman, The 5 Love Languages. A little more here, but I'll let you guys read that for yourselves. Let's move on to communication. One of the most important qualities for a relationship to survive and thrive is effective communication. So this is where some of those key questions at the beginning of this lecture might come up. Relationships are developed through communication. Lack of communication and can destroy relationships alternatively. So here's the thing about listening, right? There's a couple of different types of listening, so listen up for the differences. Autobiographical listening. When you hear that term autobiography, that's a book about someone written by someone. So it's coming only from their own perspective. So autobiographical listening is listening from the perspective of our own experience. You can see why this might cause problems because you're no longer really listening to someone for what they're trying to communicate. And this is where things might break down. Instead, you're thinking about what they're telling you and you're analyzing it as to how it would affect or impact you. Not necessarily the best way to go about things. So how can we listen autobiographically? We evaluate. Sorry, I just paused because I want to read ahead for just a moment. We evaluate. Evaluation is a form of judgment that can be either positive or negative. We probe. In probing, we attempt to dig out information. We probe for more questions. Probably seems as if we are seeking to understand, but the questions we ask come from our past experience, not from the other person's point of view. The next thing we do is we advise or tell someone. In advising, we are prescribing a course of action, what we think someone should do. Unfortunately, the person may not be ready for a definite course, or the advice might be inappropriate if the advisor does not yet know all of the pertinent information. And remember, you're only being provided what it is that they choose to tell you. And then interpreting means explaining the behavior of another person in terms of our motives. This is commonly how we listen to others. It is very much from a selfish point of view, and in the way that we respond as a result, it does not really provide much comfort or benefit to that other person. Whereas empathic listening is a totally different thing. In empathic listening is active listening with the intention and commitment of truly understanding the other person before seeking to be understood. So first seek to understand before seeking to be understood. This is an important component. This comes from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. That's one of the books I actually picked up this month just from going back over it in this class. I've talked about it for years. I've looked into it, but I'm finally reading the book. And that was one of the first things that was said. And I think there's really a lot to it. It's just something that's hard to do when you're not used to it. Empathic listening is the key to better communication, leading to better understanding, and as a result, leads to better relationships. So things that we can do is mimic the content of communication, simply repeat what is said. For example, someone says, I enjoy this class, but I don't feel challenged. You'd say, all right, so what I'm hearing from you is you like this class, but you don't feel that it challenges you. What that does, aside from just repeating it, is it just shows someone that you are, in fact, listening to what they say and you're echoing their feelings back to them. Rephrasing the content, put the other person's meaning into your own words. This takes a little more thought and mental processing than mimicking the content, but again, it shows more of an active approach. Reflecting feeling. Listen and look to the nature of emotion behind the communication, observing things like facial expression, body language, and voice. When we say voice, we're talking about tone, intensity, and volume. Those can say a lot about what is being said. And then finally, rephrasing the content and reflect the feeling. So it's combining stages 2 and 3 there, putting them out, the other person's verbal meaning and emotional content in your own words. I got news for you, ladies and gentlemen. If you are looking to be a part of the fitness industry, this empathic listening or active listening, being empathetic to someone when they're talking to you about their needs, this is the key to good relationships. Now, I'm not telling you that as a way to manipulate someone in order to get what you want or get them to buy more packages. But what I am telling you is that if you can bring yourself to do this, if you can really bring yourself to genuinely care about the person from their own perspective and not care about them from the perspective of how something they have or do can benefit you, it can help to improve your business. But it also, in the case of what we're studying this month, can really strive to help improve your relationships. So how can we do it more simply? Talk less, listen more. Don't judge. Find the good things about someone else. Don't listen just for the sake of giving advice. Allow there to be moments of silence. Don't feel like you need to fill the silence. An area where I have trouble sometimes because I'm a big mouth and I talk a lot, as you probably are sitting there thinking about as you listen to this lengthy lecture. Listen with your eyes and your heart as much as your ears, and then use the appropriate body signals. Again, more things here about the importance of touch, loving contact before a tough day at work. You can carry over and protect the person throughout the remainder of the day. So that's a nice little thing to note. If you have something going on, that little physical touch or something just as simple as holding somebody's hand right before they go off to a tough day can really strive to build somebody up and protect them against some of the stress that they might experience. Here's another one. FYI, in touch with touch. Waitresses who touch their customers get better tips than waitresses who don't. So that whole physical touch, yeah, there's something to it. Now, touch is a powerful form of nonverbal communication, but when and where, right, those are important questions. There are communication differences between men and women. When women are stressed, they tend to feel a need to talk about their feelings. When men get upset, they are less likely to talk about their concerns. So we inherently, it seems, or at least on the surface from just doing some studies, men and women handle these things differently. In the United States, couples in the United States aren't very touchy-feely in public, but comforting physical contact is out of favor among friends and coworkers because of the legal climate. See, that's what's scary, is because you're seeing that physical touch and just, and I don't mean being inappropriate. I mean just patting somebody on the back, hey man, how's it going? That's something that really does a lot for people. It's unspoken, it's unsaid, but science seems to prove it. But if you touch someone unwanted, you're worried about sexual harassment, or you're worried about, that could essentially be considered battery, a legal offense. If there's an unwanted contact, it doesn't have to be necessarily harmful, it doesn't have to actually hurt you for it to be battery. but they can get sued for it. So we have sheltered ourselves away from something as effective and simple as human touch just because people are so out for money and misery. I don't understand it, but that's what's going on. And then conflict. Now, conflict is not always a bad thing. Conflict is an expressed struggle between at least two independent parties who perceive incompatible goals, scarce rewards, and interference from the other party in achieving those goals. It's often associated with stressful outcomes like aggression, anger, damaged relationships, violence, and even wars. But conflict can be constructive. There are a number of different ways to resolve conflict, and there's a lot to be said about all of them. But there's an avoidance style, and this is someone that is unassertive and uncooperative. Accommodating style, that is being unassertive and cooperative. So you just are passive and you do whatever the person likes. Competing is aggressive and uncooperative. So someone tells you something and you don't want to do it, so you're not going to work with them and you're going to push your agenda instead. Compromising, which is the one we should strive for, although not everyone does, that's an intermediate between assertiveness and cooperativeness. It's letting someone know where you stand, it's understanding where they stand, and trying to find a happy medium. And the best of them all is being collaborative. Be assertive and cooperative. Very assertive and very cooperative, getting things across and then working together for a resolution. So, at the end of it all, social support really helps us to feel belonged, feel accepted, loved, needed. It helps to maintain supportive, healthy relationships, develop effective communication skills, and understand conflict resolution styles. Those are the things we tried to do here today. I hope that you enjoyed it, especially with the love language stuff. Look up that book if it's something that interests you. Again, remember, this class is not about learning a bunch of new facts that are going to show up on tests and exams somewhere. It's about exploring more about what makes us feel good. I feel like this class, more than any other class in our entire program, is concerned with your overall wellness, not just in body, where most of our classes are, but in mind, spirit, emotion, all around the other components of our lives. So I hope that, at least from listening and looking at some of this stuff, that you are absorbing some of the things that I'm saying and maybe changing the way that you think, or looking at tools that you can maybe use to improve some of your own circumstances and eliminate some of the unnecessary stresses in your life. Thanks, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this. We'll get on to the next one.